Well, hi, everyone. I hope you're having a great conference so far. So I'm here to talk about generative AI and LLMs and what that means for the industry, but also for us at Botpress. We are in a special kind of deadline here because we have a new product coming up March 21st, which is a completely revamped Botpress. It has nothing to do with what you've what you've seen before, but it's a generative first and LLM first product. That is completely changing the way that we develop and ship bots to the world. So I cannot say much about the product because I don't want to overstep the product release that will happen on March 21st. But this is a few bullet points and key ideas of how we think about LLMs and generative AI and what we think the industry will lean towards in the next couple of months. Certainly hope that this inspires some of you to use these tools instead of fear them. And I just look forward to the overall community, but also other vendors to adopt LLMs and generative AI and build better assistants and build better bots. So I'm very excited for this time in the industry. It's very clear with intents that this is completely the wrong way to do question answering. Intent is much more about classification than it is providing helpful answers, right? And so traditionally what we've seen in bot platforms is that you would have initially action-driven bots. So you ended up creating intents, which is sort of like classifying whatever the user says into predefined buckets. And then after, the bots needed to answer some questions. And so the only thing we had was intent, basically, to answer the question. So we kind of retrofitted question answering into the bucket classification. What that meant is that structurally and semantically similar sentences would provide exactly the same answer. Obviously, that isn't working super well, because if you have only one word of difference in the sentence, you would get exactly the same response just because they looked very similar, even though you could swap two words in the same sentence, and that would completely change the question, right? So, for example, if you say, "What time is my flight?" And if you said, "What time is your flight?" then these are two very, very different questions, but semantically they're very similar. And so they would be classified under the intent paradigm, they would be classified as extremely close. And so you would have exactly the same answers, right? So we realized that the limitations of intents were a big bottleneck in having a good customer experience for chatbots. And when we saw ChatGPT, when we saw GPT-3 3 years ago, we realized that this would be probably a much better foundation to build question answering chatbots. And so we developed for over 1 year, I think, a system we called OpenBook, which essentially was a way to filter, search the knowledge base, get the top, we call them facts, but get the top knowledge base entries that are potentially good answers to the question, sort of like doing an intent, but capturing like the top 15 intents, and then feeding this to an LLM to get the response back. So in order to get this working well, so initially we tried with just raw GPT-3. GPT-3 was very different than it is today back then. So we had to basically fine tune GPT-3 in order to really optimize the system and to get like really accurate and truthful answers. And so what we did is, we fine-tuned GPT-3. We created a huge data set, and which, by the way, is still today the biggest NLU data set for question answering on the planet. And this has been open sourced by Botpress. But we manually created this data set and we trained it on it. And then we essentially had two different types of models. So we had a model that would give you accurate and truthful answer, would never say something wrong, simply by spitting out the knowledge base entries that were used to craft the response. And then we had a different mode that we call the loose mode, which sort of like ChatGPT does today, allowed to rewrite the answer by selecting which part was important and trying to provide like a more human-like response. And to this day, so we've released this over a year ago. So we've been, super early on the LLM side. I believe this was the first LLM-based product in the conversational AI industry. And today, OpenBook is now the default engine. We obviously retrained OpenBook on top of ChatGPT and the new GPT 3.5. It is now much better than it was last year. But this sort of just highlights the scale and the speed at which LLMs are developing. What 1 year ago was really groundbreaking and completely exploding all the other ways of doing NLU is now, if you take the same OpenBook, is now considered archaic. If you look at the response quality that you would get out of ChatGPT. And so we knew that we had to rebuild. And so like the technology is changing super rapidly. But this is one of the base assumptions that we make at Botpress, is that this space will keep going at that speed. And so next year we think that, like everything that we have now in terms of cognition and intelligence and models will have to be trashed and replaced by newer and better and faster models. In terms of existing platforms, it's interesting because the way that they've been built was very technical, because you in order to make the old paradigm work, which is intent-based and sort of dialogue trees based, you really had to engineer a lot of things manually. And you ended up needing very specialized workers to operate these platforms and to build something that was sort of high quality, right? Now, what's interesting with generative AI, not only is the intelligence much better, which requires way less engineering to create something good, you also see that generative AI can be used at build time to really reduce the complexity and abstract away all of the technicalities required to build something good, right? So I think fundamentally the platforms have to change, not only in the backend, like the runtime aspect of these platforms, like how good the answers are and how good is the intent recognition, if intents they still are. But I think they have to also rework the entire user interface, like how you define, how you build the bots. Because fundamentally, a lot of what existed before is completely useless nowadays. If you think in terms of this new paradigm and these new tools, there simply isn't as much need for like customizations and low-level definition of everything that the bot should say and do at every step of the dialogue, right? You can offload a lot of that complexity and cognition, if you will, to the LLMs. Instead of asking what can LLMs do, I think the real question is what can't LLMs do? Ultimately, right now, they sort of can replace a lot of question answering logic. They can automate a lot of the dialogue, static dialogue tree. They can make pretty good decisions by themselves. You can offload some of the reasoning of what the next best action should be, etc. for the agent. One of the problems that we have now is sort of speed, accuracy, and control over the LLMs, and also cost is also a big factor in how companies will adopt LLMs in production today. But all of these problems are being addressed and solved by very big companies, right? Like there's the brightest minds on the planet right now working on solving these things. And so at Botpress, we just assume that these things will be completely solved within the next 12 to 24 months. And we want to build a platform in consequence of that. So I think pretty much everything that we do now is sort of just to work around temporarily until the LLMs can do almost everything by themselves. There will always be some kind of like unique process to your business, right? The reservation process might be different for your business than it is for another business in the exact same industry. And so I think, like the way that LLMs will be used to address that will still be something that you'll have to do manual, or at least you'll have to tune it manually for your business. But I don't think that we will still be building, like logic trees and building manually the intents and building FAQ bases by hand and crafting all the responses by hand in 2 years. I think that's completely absurd that we still do that, where LLMs can do all these things much faster than we do. But I think we should be here to sort of guide the AI to do these things in the way that we want, and that is aligned with your brand and your processes internally. And so we can imagine in the future, which is not too far away, that you'll simply be providing the standard operating procedures, your knowledge bases, you'll be providing access to your systems and your documentation to the platforms, and the platforms will absorb this knowledge, distill it, create an experience that is considered state of the art for your customers, and you'll have the ability to tweak it, right? But sort of 99% of the effort that goes into creating your agents will disappear. We made a list of all the things that would be different in 1 year and 2 years. And we've had this in mind for many years now, but these were just fantasies. And now it's interesting because all of these fantasies and, like all dreams are coming true. And so we quickly realized that there was no way of retrofitting these features and being like LLM first, if that meant retrofitting this into the current product. So we had to build a new product basically from the ground up, that would be best suited and would allow us to move much quicker and adopt the LLMs much faster as they get released. And so we came out with a cloud native product that really allows us to leverage all of these LLMs improvements. We are announcing this product on March 21st, which is next week. I don't want to jump the gun here and show you the platform. I can only talk briefly about it, but I think this will be a very, very impressive release. This will be by far the best product, in my opinion, on the market, leveraging LLMs. Not even close. We have LLMs everywhere in the product, which might sound scary for enterprise use cases. But fortunately, we've built in a lot of the safety measures that we had in OpenBook with the strict mode in terms of like answering and all these things. We've built in safety into the product because we realized that right now this is still a concern. We think that this concern will evaporate in the next 12 months. But yeah, I mean, the product is completely different, but we think that this will be by far the best product. I don't think LLMs equals AGI, far from that. But I think LLMs, and that's what most people in the industry don't realize, but LLMs will be a key ingredient in developing AGI. What LLMs allows you, what they allow you to do is, for the first time, we have a much faster loop of taking the world's knowledge, coming up with hypotheses, and being able to test these hypotheses, get new data, highly labeled data out of it, and looping back. What I mean is by that, with a concrete example, you can, with natural language, you can generate code, which can be your hypothesis. And your prompt tells you what the code should be able to do. Now you can take a compiler, which is a human-based tool, right, that takes in code as an input. You can take this compiler, compile the code, get all the errors out of it. And from the errors, or maybe just the output, you can now feed that as a perfectly labeled data set. And so we have this loop of improvement of like LLMs can do actions now, and they can create new data that is like orders of magnitude higher in terms of data density and quality than we were able to create us as humans, right? Now we can automate these feedback loops. And so what I think will happen is that we'll see more of these loops. So code generation, code execution is just one of these loops. We will see it with 3D engines. We will see it with, we already see it with brain scans. So biology loops will also be happening. We will see it with physics engines and simulations. And what will be interesting, and that's sort of my hope of what GPT-4 will be, is if we can take multi-modality and basically combine the outputs and these loops together. So if you can combine the code loops, and you can combine the 3D loops and the physics engine loops and the biology loops, then I think now you have a very high potential foundation for what AGI, for bootstrapping basically what will be AGI. And the goal of this master loop will be to discover the new architecture for AGI, right? So I think what this does is not that it is AGI by itself, it's just allowing hyper exponential rate of improvement in science and technology that is sort of like self-creating hypothesis, but also self-testing these hypotheses and creating new data that allows it to be better and taking better decisions. And so if we have these loops just compounding and improving technology faster, then I think LLMs will be the ones coming up with AGI. Really good chatbots don't exist today, which is a problem. And the reason, like the real reason, is because it is way too complex and difficult, which I'm blaming not on the intelligence and the effort that goes into creating those tools, but also the assistance. But I'm blaming it on the way that we're doing it and the fundamental the foundations of these of the technology. I think with LLMs, we'll spend way less time creating those assistants. They'll be like orders of magnitude more smarter than they were before, and that's a good thing because we'll be able to spend more time building more assistants, more use cases, and these assistants ultimately will provide way more value to the end customers. Yeah, it just like many of the data labeling and basically scripted dialogue trees and decision making will disappear. We will also see adjacent building assistance from LLMs, such as code generation, taking action. So now you'll be able to be essentially conversation designers and less technical people will be able to build bots by themselves without requiring a developer at every step of the dialogue. This is something that you'll see in the new Botpress as well. We have generative AI all over the product, which in theory allows someone really not technical to build something that is highly technical in the background. So it generates code for you. That's also very interesting. And this will become a big trend in the industry. March 21st is the webinar, is the launch of our product to the public. Here's a link that you can use to subscribe to the webinar. This should be the most impressive product that you'll see this year, hopefully, in this industry. This is just the beginning. This is V1 of that new platform. We have a very strong roadmap into how we're gonna make this more amazing as the backend technology improves. But yeah, I'm hoping that everyone in the industry can see this and sort of help us improve that tool. By the way, we're still an open source company, so the vast majority of the code will be completely open sourced. And this is a community-based project, so we're hoping for the community to contribute ideas, features, data sets, improvements to the tool. And yeah, I think, you know, I look forward to see everyone watching the webinar and providing ideas and letting us know what you think about it. Thanks everyone for listening. I wish I was there with you this year, couldn't make it, but I hope you have a great rest of the event. And if you're interested in chatting LLMs and generative AI, don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Sylvain Perron, and I wish you all a great rest of the event.